Hello and welcome to Gen Psych. We are now in chapter 12, one of my very favorite chapters. So we are just going to jump right in. Now, I don't know why I'm not showing up on the screen, but you know what? That doesn't matter. All right, so when you see the two terms, you look at personality and temperament. The difference between the two, they kind of roll in together, but your personality is all about you. It's how you think, act, and feel. And your personality is consistent and it's enduring and it lasts all through your lifespan. So even though your personality is pretty set early in life, you can change and grow because of life's experiences. Whereas with temperament, that kind of remains stable. So if you were a calm child, as when you were 2 and 3 and 4, then chances are as an adult, you're going to remain stable. That is going to remain your temperament. You're not going to be a calm and stable child and then turn out to be a all over the place adult. So your personality is what's shaped and it's, consistent, it's fluid over your lifespan, whereas your temperament is going to remain stable because it is molded by your earlier, environmental situations. I don't know why I got stuck there for a second. All right, we're going to skip on through there. All right, so when we look at the theoretical perspectives on personality, you see we've got psychoanalytic, behavioral, humanistic, social cognitive, biological, and trait. So when you look at psychoanalytic, according to Freud, he's the big psychoanalysis guru here. So he believed that your personality was developed early in life and that it was shaped by unconscious processes, specifically sexual urges. He was very big on that. And so the critics of Freud were like, okay, listen, not everything is about the unconscious. Not everything has to do with sex. There are other things like what you're currently experiencing in the moment. So they believe that Freud overemphasized certain things like the role of sexual behavior and the unconscious. When you look at behavioral, they view that your personality is shaped through your environment. So behaviors that you can see. So that focuses on behavioral processes. And then that perspective ignores the influence of unconscious processes. So it kind of is the opposite with psychoanalysis. When you look at humanistic, that's looking at the perspective that we are all in control of our destinies and that we're pretty innately good human beings. But the critics of that, it's difficult to operationally define. And it also ignores the negative aspects of human nature. It's looking specifically at all the positives. And then your social cognitive, that focuses on what it says, social influences, and cognition is thinking. So it's your mental processes on personality. And that also narrowly focuses on social cognitive and ignores the influence of unconscious. Your biological is going to look at all of your genetic components. So all the explanations of the nature side of the debate. And with the criticisms of that it's kind of inconsistent because you're not looking at your environmental influences. You're only looking at your genetics. And then your trait looks at current traits to describe personality and predict behaviors. But of course, that underestimates environmental influences. And there's a lot of different trait theories, and we'll quickly go over some of those. Okay, so now good old Freud. So you've got pictured there, you've got Freud and his dad. So in the psychoanalytic view, childhood is the prime time for personality development, greatly influenced by what Freud said, internal conflicts, aggression, and sexual urges. The term psychoanalysis is derived from his theory on, or psychoanalytic theory. It's also important to note that because there was so much criticism against Freud, and that is because he lacked scientific support. So there was no real science behind his theories, like in all of the other theories, But the reason they keep good old Freud around, it's because a lot of what he says was very telling and very valid. So when you look at his theory, there's part of it that you could say, that is just whack. But then you can look at other parts of his theory and see that there's a lot of, truth to that. All right, so moving on. So the level of consciousness, according to Freud, there is conscious, preconscious, and unconscious. And you're going to see the Freudian iceberg, and you might have seen that in the past. And those are the things that are pretty still accepted by people. All right, so you've got your conscious. That is your state of being aware of yourself, your thoughts, and your environment. So those are things, again, that are conscious that you're aware of. The preconscious is right outside of your current awareness, but it can be easily brought to your attention through a memory or through somebody prompting something. And then your unconscious is really all outside of your awareness, and that's the part that's really hard to get to unless you're in therapy, because for some reason you might be going through something and it's too difficult to face it. So that's how your brain will protect you, by keeping it in the unconscious. All right, so moving on to Freud's structural model. So if you've ever heard the id, ego, and superego, it's kind of like the id is the devil and the superego is the angel, and the ego is what is considered like the mediator, kind of runs back and forth between the id and the ego. So you need to remember these three models, these three structural models. So the id is your most primitive structure of the mind, activities which occur at the unconscious level, and they're guided by the pleasure principle. So know that the id is guided by the pleasure principle. And basically what that means is, if I want it, I want it. Don't care about the consequences. If it feels good, I'm doing it. I'm not going to think about if it's right to do it. I'm not going to think about if it's wrong to do it. It's just, I want what I want when I want it, so I'm going for it. That's kind of how the id runs. The ego runs on the reality principle. So that uses the kind of that reality to manipulate various situations, planning for your future, solving problems, and then making decisions as you go. So your ego is kind of like the in-between of the id and superego, like I said, and that's kind of like, all right, well, should I do this? Well, I mean, I know that there are consequences, but maybe it won't be so bad. So it's kind of like that go-between inside of your brain. And then you've got your superego, which is like your moral compass. And that's the structure of the mind that guides your behavior, follows rules, listens to your parents and other authority figures. So your superego is going to say, I'm not going to do this because it's not the right thing to do. So it kind of battles all the time with your id. So just kind of think of that as like on the left side, your id is sitting there, and on your right side, your super ego is sitting there. And then all that in between stuff, that's your ego. All right, so if you want to look at it on a picture level, this is the psychoanalytic theory of your mind. So if you look again, you see your ego, and that's kind of just right under the tip of that iceberg. And that's what I was saying before. It's monitoring the demands of the id and superego. Your superego is, if you look at it to the right, those are very rule-following parts of your brain. And that's looking at, okay, this is not right to do. And so again, it's battling between what am I saying? It's not battling. It's the right thing to do, and your ego is what's battling between your id and ego. This picture really does explain a lot. And then again, your id, just look at your id as your selfish side. It's impulsive, it's illogical, it doesn't think. And just because you grow up into an adult and you learn to do the right thing. It doesn't mean that from time to time that your id is not going to kick in, because it does do that. All right, there are ego defense mechanisms that are Freudian, and two of them that we're going to go over in detail. These are the, two that you really want to know. These are the two most talked about. And so your defense mechanisms are the things that you do with, that are not really in your awareness. And again, they're conflicting things that are going on between the id, ego, and superego. So one of those defense mechanisms that people use a lot is what's called projection. So that occurs when the expression of a thought or urge is so anxiety provoking that the ego makes us see it in someone else or accuse another of harboring these same urges. So when you project, something onto someone, it's really you. It's really you putting your feelings onto somebody else. So if you ever notice when you project your feelings onto someone else, you kind of have to look back and ask yourself, all right, is that really what they think, or am I putting this on the person? So think about it like if you're mad at somebody and you're arguing and you say, well, you do this and, you're thinking this. It's like, okay, are they really thinking that? Is that what's coming out of their mouth? Or is this something that you're putting on them? Repression, that's another big one. Repression is when something is so maybe traumatic or uncomfortable to face. It's, memories of a past of something that terrible, maybe that happened to you. Your brain will protect you by repressing it. It'll repress it to this unconscious awareness until maybe you are ready to deal with it. So, and that usually happens in therapy. Usually we repress memories when they're so traumatic, like when someone has been sexually assaulted or times of war. People will, come out of that, and it's kind of like an out-of-body experience, and your brain kind of fractures and mentally fractures. So in order to protect you, your brain will repress those memories until maybe you are able to deal with them. All right, so those other ego defense mechanisms I was talking about, you've got sublimation, identification, displacement, the repression, rationalization, projection, and denial. So the picture they show, it's a good representation. Your id says, okay, I'm attracted to my best friend's boyfriend. And the id is saying, who cares? Go for it. It's what you want. Do it. But your super ego is saying, how dare you be attracted to that person? It's wrong to feel those impulses. And you can see she's looking down. She's confused. She's kind of fighting it. That's the ego. That's the anxiety that's caused from the two things that are battling with each other. The other things we're not going to go over, but, just if you look at, let's look at displacement, for example. Displacement is when you put your anger or anxiety onto, let's say, an object because you can't do it to the actual person that you're angry at. So let's say you're angry at your teacher because you got an F on something, or you're angry at your significant other, and all you want to do is punch them in the face. Let's just say, well, you can't do that because you're going to get in trouble. So instead, you might punch a wall, or you might punch your pillow, or you might punch a tree, or whatever the case is. So that is when you are placing it on something else. And that's, it's good if you do it in the right way, like going to the gym and getting it out that way. But when it's, punching a wall, guess what's going to happen the moment you do it? You're going to regret it. All right, so we're skipping through that. All right, so here comes the fun part where we look at now Freud's psychosexual stages. This would be so much funner. That's not even really real. Okay, this would be so much more fun if we were doing this in class, because it's kind of like, geez, dude, what were you thinking? So you do need to know Freud's psychosexual stages of development. So according to Freud, he said that all of us pass through these stages from birth to adulthood, and where each of the erogenous zones have this conflict, and you have to deal with it to be able to move on. So you've got oral, anal, phallic, latency, and genital. Of course, the oral is the child stage. And of course, if these things aren't dealt with as a child, you're going to see these rear their ugly heads later in life, according to Freud. So this explains it pretty basically. So we'll just run through this one. So at the oral stage, you're from birth to about 1.5 years old. The erogenous zone is the mouth. And that is because just think of it, when you see a baby and a little infant, everything is going in the mouth. They're learning, they're nursing, they're sucking on their binky, they're chewing, they're gumming, everything is new to them. And so the conflict in that stage is weaning. So it's weaning off of the mother, it's weaning off of the bottle. And so what happens if those things were not developed early in life and there was a conflict in that stage of life, then the results might be later on in life, you might become what they call orally fixated. So you might start smoking, drinking, biting your nails, or talking a lot. And so if you notice as an adult, if you do smoke, or if you drink a lot, or you are a nail biter, some might say that you are orally fixated, that you are stuck in a conflict that maybe you didn't address or deal with when you were growing up as a child. And so that's why you will hear that term a lot. Just like with Erikson stages, you're going to see that with any of the theorists. They're going to have some type of conflict. All right, moving on to the anal stage. That's 1.5 to about 3 years old. The erogenous zone there is the anus, and the focus of that is eliminating bodily waste. And the conflict that's going on there that you're trying to get through is toilet training. This is about the time when children are starting to go to the bathroom, and parents are training them and they're becoming more independent. But what happens if they're not developing properly? And again, this has a lot to do with parents. So, if they're like, oh, they don't want to deal with it or whatever, that all goes on the child. And what happens is later on in life, according to Freud, you're going to have these fixation, happenings. And so you might be, rule bound, stingy, chaotic, or destructive. And so that's why if you've ever heard of the sayings, you're so anal repulsive or anal retentive, you might hear that because if you're very stingy and you follow everything to a T, your significant other might say that about you. The phallic stage is 3 to 6 years old, where the erogenous zone is the genitals. And that is when you are starting to, believe it or not, have these little sexual feelings and awareness of yourself. That's when you're getting to learn your body. You're touching yourself. You're figuring out who you are. And Freud did a big study on a boy named Hans. So if you're interested in that wacky study, it's a case study by Freud about a little boy named Hans. So the conflict going on in the phallic stage is self-stimulation. So again, think about it. Their child is about 4 or 5 years old. They're touching themselves. They're in the store. They're sitting on the couch, playing around, and the parent is like, stop it. Stop touching yourself. Well, now the child is made to feel that what they're doing is wrong. And so if the parent doesn't explain, like, okay, we don't do that in public, or, they talk to him about it, then the child might feel like, again, there's something wrong with them. And the result of that fixation later in life might lead to promiscuity, being very flirtatious, having a lot of vanity, or being having overdependence. And they say that people that are, go through that conflict will masturbate a lot. So these are all of the stages that we want to kind of get through. The latency period, that's your dormant stage. So that's why you see the 3 blank boxes. That's 6 years to puberty. That's when a child is developing mentally, socially, and physically. So they're not really kind of focused on those stages. They're focusing on, okay, developing on who they are as a person. And then when you get to the last stage, that's the genital stage. That's puberty and beyond. The erogenous zone is the genitals again, but now it's like, okay, now I know what these are. Now it's like, okay, I know what I'm supposed to be doing. And it's kind of, again, a rebirth, a reawakening of sexuality. And that's when you start focusing on relationships. And the conflict going on there is sexuality and aggression. So if you are not, in your puberty and beyond, if you're not identifying with who you are, then you're going to have that possible type of conflict. And then the result of that fixation is inability to thrive in adult activities, like work and love. So you may be in and out of relationships, in and out of work situations because you haven't dealt with those things that happened earlier in life. All right, so again, this is now just going through everything I already explained. So you can pause the video, or you can, look at the still PowerPoint and look at this further. So again, weaning too early or too late can have long-term consequences on your personality development. So again, they've always said in psychology, like, you blame everything on your parents. So every chapter, it really deals with, okay, how did you develop as a child? How did you get through things? Did your parents talk to you? Did they get you through things? All right, so again, what I said before, in the anal stage, if you look at the bottom, if you go through this stage and it was either too harsh or too lenient, then they will say that you're anal retentive, so you're rule bound and stingy, or that you're anal expulsive and you're the opposite. You're destructive, or you're very chaotic in your personality. Okay, so this is really interesting. I always love going over this one. So this, again, I was telling you before about how Freud did a study on a boy named Hans. So the phallic stage is between the years of 3 and 6, and this is when you're really focused on the genitals. And he did this study. I highly suggest you checking it out because it's kind of crazy. But what Freud said was that you're going to go through either these two things based on if you're a girl or a boy. The Oedipus complex is when you have this attraction to your mom, and you're so resentful towards your dad and you want to get rid of him because he's standing in the way of you being with your mother. So that sounds like, whoa, most of my boys, when I talk about that, they're like, that's disgusting. I never want to be with my mother. But according to Freud, boys go through the Oedipus complex, and girls go through the Electra complex, where the girl is attracted to her dad, and then she's jealous and has anger towards her mother. And so, if you go through everything the way you're supposed to, then you're going to kind of identify with mom or dad, and you're going to get through this stage and everything is going to be okay. But if you think about it in a psychodynamic way and not the psychoanalytic way, it's kind of, I try to explain it like this. All right. And you have to also remember that Freud's stages were in the Victorian era, when we didn't talk about sexuality, and women, you didn't talk about your feelings or any of that, because if you did, then, you were dirty, something was wrong with you. So I try to explain it like in a newer approach. So if you have a son, and your son tells you when he's a little boy, 3 to 6 years old, Mommy, you're so beautiful. When I grow up, I want to marry you. That's normal. That's actually very normal, because a boy, if you think about it, a boy will, in relationships, he will compare his girlfriends to his mom. Now, mind you, we are talking about heterosexual relationships. back in this era. We're not talking about any other thing. So again, there's criticisms because it's not up to date. So, but if you think about it on that level, it's like that's normal because the mom takes care of her son. She loves him. She guides him. And so, of course, when he gets older, he is going to want to emulate that. He wants to bring home somebody to mom that he is going to be proud of. So, somebody that he's just hooking up with, chances are he's not going to bring him home to mom because he wants mom to approve. So, if that helps you understand it on a better level for psychodynamic and not, Freud's wacko psychoanalytic approach, that's how I try to explain it. Same with the electric complex. Girls are daddy's girls. And so when they get older and they're dating, they don't want to bring home somebody that dad is not going to approve of. So or on the flip side, it's if you have a negative relationship with your dad, a lot of times people say daddy issues. So girls end up being with someone just like their dad or, the very opposite of their father. So if we were in class, of course, we would be really talking about this because it's a great topic to actually talk about because there's a lot of conversation going on with this. And then you see penis envy. All right, that's another funny thing. So Freud said women were envious of men because they didn't have a penis like men did. And so, I guess when you need to go to the bathroom and there's no bathroom, yeah, sometimes I guess girls could be envious, but not like in the way that Freud said. So conflicts are successful when they are resolved by identifying with them. So once you identify with the mom and you realize, okay, mom, you're not trying to, take away my dad. You realize, okay, these are just childlike behaviors. Once things get resolved, then these kind of complexes go away. If that makes sense. If any of this makes sense. All right, so again, we already discussed latency period. That's kind of when it's like dormant, nothing really going on. And then, of course, the genital stage is kind of the rebirth. All right, so now we look at our neo-Freudians. These are the ones that said, okay, Freud, you are crazy. All right, that everything does not have to do with sex, but we're going to take those parts out and we're going to leave the other parts in and we're going to add our own to it. So you'll notice with psychology, they adopt certain parts of a theory and then they tweak it and add to it. So your neo-Freudians are like Alfred Adler and Karen Horney, which I'll talk about her in just a minute. So Alfred Adler was another neo-Freudian. He said humans are not just pleasure seekers, but conscious and intentional in their behaviors. We're motivated by the need to feel superior, and this drive originates in childhood. His theory of individual psychology focuses on each person's unique struggle with feelings of inferiority. So Alfred Adler, his contribution was the inferiority complex, and he really stressed the influence of birth order and how the firstborn, secondborn, and then lastborn, each one of their roles. So the firstborn, according to Adler, those are the ones that were, the most successful. They were the ones that kind of played by the rules. And then you have your, the middle child syndrome, they say, where that's the child that's kind of in the middle. They're fighting for parents' attention. And then you've got the lastborn, which is like the baby. So they get away with, everything. And they say that the lastborn is the one that gets like in the most trouble. But with today, we have mixed families, blended families, where remarriages happen. And so it's kind of escaped that first, middle, and last. So again, you've got to look at when this was a theory, when this theory happened, you're looking at the 50s and 60s. And so we have to look at, what's happening now because divorce rates are higher. Back then, people stayed together. So it was very normal to have 3 children. And so there was that kind of stereotype of those three types of children. And if you do happen to be in that situation where you are still with parents who are together, then you might be able to relate to this. So again, if you look at this, like I explained, firstborns are conscientious, high achieving, play by the rules, they do really well in school, and they are your leaders. Your middle children, like I said, they kind of get lost, but they end up being self-sufficient because they don't have mom or dad to they have their parents, but like I said, parents put so much into their first child and their last child that the kind of middle one just gets lost fighting for all that attention. And then the youngest one that's the favored one, usually, because the parents know, okay, this is our last child. We have to really give them everything, so that, those children end up growing up to be more rebellious, as studies show. Again, correlation doesn't mean causation, but it does show that in these three situations, these are very popular stereotypes that, do happen a lot. All right. Carl Jung was it's pronounced Jung. He also is a Neo-Freudian, believed in the collective unconscious, that universal experiences of humankind pass from generation to generation, and a personal unconscious, which is very similar to preconscious and unconscious. Like I said before, all of these theorists take their own, they adopt, a lot of previous stages, and then they kind of tweak it to make it their own. So if you look at Karen Horney, know who she is. She was a Neo-Freudian that was the opposite of Freud. She was like, hey, listen, dude, we're not penis envy. You guys are womb envy. And meaning, she was like, we don't want to have a penis, but you guys wish that you had a womb. You wish that you guys could hold listen to me, hold a baby. I mean, that you could carry a baby and deliver a baby. So she had the opposite kind of thought of Freud. All of it is a little kind of wacky. All right, so his legacy. So what did he contribute? So he recognized the importance of infancy and early childhood in that developing of personality. The self has depth that we should strive to know and understand. However, he was criticized because his theory did lack scientific validity. There were no studies to support or really refute his studies. It's kind of like he looked at it as common sense. Hey, Siri. That's my Siri. Overemphasis on sexuality and unconscious forces. He focused way too much on sex. And then lack of attention to developmental forces beyond childhood. So it was kind of like, all right, once childhood happened, we're stuck here. So nothing, beyond that. And then theory based on a biased, non-representative sample. So he based a lot of his theory on women and women alone. All right, so now moving on to humanism, which is considered the third force in psychology. You've got Abraham Maslow, which I've talked about before. He believed that psychologists should study human creativity, growth, healthy functioning, not just on mental illness, but on what is actually good. And self-actualizers he looked at, those are the people that continue to reach their full potential. And you see that with his hierarchy of needs, the one that you went over previously. All right, so these are the humanistic theories. This is the tendencies, the characteristics, and then examples if you want to look at that on your own. All right, so then you have Carl Rogers. He is another humanistic psychologist, and he developed what's called client-centered therapy. He believed that it was very important that you know your self-concept and that your ideal self is the best version of you. And he also believed in showing people unconditional positive regard. He was considered to be the most beloved psychologist that ever lived because he was able to look at everybody and see good in everyone, whereas that is not very ideal. It's not how most psychologists look at things. Most of us realize that there are flaws. most of us, therapists realize we cannot work with everybody. There are people that we are not willing to work with because if we are biased against something, like, for example, let's say pedophiles, if a therapist or psychologist cannot work with a pedophile, or if they do and they have bias against that, then they are not going to give level of care that they need to. Whereas Carl Rogers believed that everybody can be worked with. And so it's great in theory to think like that, but it's not very realistic. But again, he was somebody that was very loved because he was able to do that where really no other psychologist can. All right, so when we look at the contributions of the humanistic theory, it led to less negative and more balanced view of human nature. The field of positive psychology was birthed from this approach, but then again, it is subjective. It makes experiments very difficult, and it shouldn't discount the role of early experiences and negative life events. And if we're constantly praising and looking at things positively, that's also counterproductive, because we kind of do need to look at the things that shaped us to be able to move through things that, gave us problems in life. So every approach and every perspective has their place in psychology. It's just important to understand, where does each one fit? When we look at the behaviorist, again, their view in personality is looking at behaviors like Skinner and Watson. So if you look at the behaviorist perspective, those are things through classical and operant conditioning. But unfortunately, it's too simplistic to just look at what you can see. It totally ignores at the things that are going on internally. So you can't see if your heart is breaking. Now, people that can look at a face and see, okay, something is wrong, okay, that's different. But if the behaviorist looks at, okay, if I can't see it, then it's not real, versus the humanistic approach or cognitive approach or all the other approaches look at, okay, it doesn't look at what's not directly observable. So that's a problem. And then assumes that humans are passive and unaware of what is going on in their internal and external environments. All right, we can skip through this stuff. All right, Albert Bandura, he's the one responsible for the social cognitive perspective, and Albert Bandura did the experiment with the Bobo doll. So the social learning perspective, the contributions from that, among the first theories to recognize that people are not exclusive products of their environment, but that things can be altered, according to what is going on in your environment. And criticisms, importance of unconscious processes and emotional influences were ignored. So basically, that old adage of monkey see, monkey do, it didn't look at the role of what other people in your life, how that influenced who you are as a person. All right, so now when we look at the trait theories, we're going to run through those really quick. The major theorists in that are Alport, Cattell, Isaac, and then what's called the Big Five. All right, I'm going to go through these. So when you look at if you've ever taken the 16 personality factor inventory, which for your activity, you're going to be doing the Myers-Briggs test. So they look at these, if you look at the left and the right, you've got reserved and then the opposite, outgoing. You've got concrete thinker versus abstract thinker. So you look at surface traits and source traits, and then there is this, smaller version of a test, and it looks at your 16 factor personality to see where you fall in this, where you're doing one like that, but not this one exactly. It's a little more in depth. And then Hans Ising, there was a lot of issues with his, but he looked at these dimensions of introversion and introversion and extroversion, and then looked at neuroticism and psychoticism. So if you look at the table there, you look at an unstable introvert. So unstable introvert, they say, is moody, anxious, rigid, sober, not like the sober, alcohol sober, not like that. Pessimistic, reserved, unsociable, and quiet. And so you might look and say, oh my gosh, I'm quiet. That means I'm unstable. That's not what that means. What it's saying is, and again, there needs to be a lot of discussion with this. Quiet to the degree to which you are not even seen. So you're so quiet, you're so unsociable, it's like nobody knows you're there. Versus the opposite, if you look at the unstable, optimistic, and active, it is, they are, and that's the extrovert, they are so happy. It's, nobody should be that happy all the time. So if you lost somebody and you tripped and fell and you had a bad day and everything in your day was going absolutely horrible and you were walking around going, that's okay, everything is good, everything is going to be okay, you know, you just got to stay optimistic. Well, guess what? That's also not realistic and that's unstable. So he looks at personality on, okay, introvert stable is passive, careful, thoughtful, peaceful, controlled, reliable, even-tempered, and calm. Oopsie, wait. And then your stable extrovert is going to be sociable, outgoing, talkative, responsive, easygoing, lively, carefree, and has leadership skills. So look at the wheel and you say, okay, where do I fall? Don't look at the words and think, oh my gosh, I'm quiet, so that means I'm unstable. It's, okay, if you're stable introvert and you look at the bottom left, it's, okay, you're even-tempered and calm. So it's you don't let all of the stuff get to you. That's what that's. It's more difficult when, you know, again, I'm just doing this on a presentation, then I'm trying not to just talk. But of course, I'm the only one talking. All right, so if you look at the big 5 factor, the acronym for that is OCEAN. You want to know that. Know the acronym for OCEAN. So openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. So in that 5 factor model, openness, are you conforming, uncreative, practical, or are you unconforming, creative, and imaginative? That shows how open you are. Conscientious, unreliable, lazy, spontaneous, or are you reliable, ambitious, and punctual? So when you look at these scales and you take this type of test, it's going to give you where you fall on openness versus unopenness, conscientiousness versus unconscientious, extroversion versus introversion, etc. All right, let's skip on through all this. All right, so with trait theories, key contributions, important psychological research is facilitated by trait theory. It can also lead to new insights, new testing especially. That's why when you look at all of these tests, they tweak and they make tests better and they make them more reliable and valid to what's going on right now. But the criticisms, failure to capture the nuances of personality, the origins of personality are not explained, and then environmental influences on personality are also underestimated. All right, 2 things you want to know. You want to know the difference between reliability and validity. I talked about before. Reliability is the degree to which assessment produces stable and consistent results. So know that reliability means consistency and validity means accuracy. So I would tell you that with reliability and personality test, when you take the test that you're going to take for your grade, the Myers-Briggs, it doesn't matter if you took that 5 years ago or you take it this week. A reliable test means that you're going to spit out those same letters. So with the Myers-Briggs, I'm an ENFJ. And it doesn't matter if I take it again in 10 years from now, my numbers might tweak, but I'm always going to be an ENFJ. So that means it's a reliable test because it's consistently producing the same results. And then validity is the degree to which the test measures what it's supposed to measure. So is it measuring personality? So if I were to give you a psychology test and I were asking you math questions, that means the test I'm giving you is not valid because I'm measuring on something that's not psychology. So you want to know that reliability is consistency and validity is accuracy. All right, we don't need to get into types of interviews. If we were in class, I would be showing you the Rorschach test. They're very cool, but they're very subjective. They're ink blot test, and they use those to look at different levels of personality to uncover, different personality characteristics. So I won't ask you anything about the Rorschach, but if you've ever seen it, that's what to the right, that's what it looks like. So you would get this Rorschach test, you'd have to look at it, and they would say, okay, if you saw like a butterfly, or if you saw a heart, if you saw whatever, they would, they record everything, and then they, once they do the test, then they would, sit with you and talk about it, versus do you see demons? Do you see the devil? Then they're going to look at that and say, okay, what is going on within your personality? All right, zipping. All right, so we're going to skip through all this. The MMPI-2, what I do want you to know about that is the most widely used personality inventory. It's the only one that's admissible in a court of law. It's usually used to look at your stability levels. It's used in child cases of like in divorce, when it comes to why am I stuck? Custody battles. So that, just know that is the one, that's the test that is most used, and the only one accepted in a court of law. And then again, went over the 16 personality factor, and the Myers-Briggs is the one that you are going to be taking for your grade. All right, so again, most commonly used, often used to inform decisions about custody or other legal issues. It contains 10 clinical scales. I had to take it. It's 567 questions. It's a very lengthy test, but it's very valid and very reliable, which is why they use it in court. All right, so I'm going to just... All right, that is that. I kept it under 50 minutes. I know that was long. Probably had to pause a little bit. But with that, I'm going to now stop the video. Go ahead, if you need to go back through and see what I said about these are the things that you wanted to know. And then we will see you in the next video. All right, peace.